It is 5 p.m. in Newcastle, Australia. It is just gone 8 in the morning in Manchester, England. And this is the only place in the world where you can get a double dose of magic for a massive weekend of rugby league. And if you sit down long enough, you can hear the silent screams of fans complaining about the referees. Yes, this is the Sideline Chat Podcast, the one-stop shop for rugby league. Along with Mark Hendry, I'm Connor Marcellus, and tonight we welcome you to Season 5 after an enforced 12-month layoff. Don't ask where we were during that time. But we have a double dose of magic. The NRL's Magic Round and Super League's Magic Weekend all in one. Mark Hendry, I've got to say, what a good way to come back for.
Oh, absolutely. Double magic, league magic. What are we going to get results-wise? Who bloody knows? It's all going to be up in the air. And what things are we going to see player-wise? Like your superstars across NRL, like your Nathan Clearys and the likes. What about in the Super League, your Bevan Frenches, your Jai Fields? What else we got? Like, what magic are they all going to produce?
Well, we have got a massive weekend. And Thursday with the Women's State of Origin, but our main focus, Friday through to Monday morning with everything magic. And we start off with the NRL Magic Round. The Cronulla Sharks, day one, up against the Parramatta Eels. Now, of course, the Eels, we had written them off as the joke for the longest time. Pretty much where we've seen them, of course, putting them down in the bottom four. But they've had a week off. They get Mitchell Moses back, fully healed, fully fresh. Just one change for Parramatta. To this point as well, Kelma Longy is out, so Charlie Geimer will start in the back row for Jason Riles, hoping to pull off back-to-back wins for the first time in his career.
That would be pretty impressive. For the Sharkies, there has only been a couple of changes. Kyle Iro, or Kale Iro, whatever he goes by nowadays. He's returning straight into the centres in the swap with Moana Hirarote. Hamanueli is also due back, and he's been named on the interchange. That's the only two changes after... I'm faulting here.
This is a good way to start Season 5, isn't it? Already, one of the hosts has a psychological breakdown because he couldn't get over Anzac Day. And now he's got to try and get over a psychological breakdown on behalf of his neighbours in Cronulla. So there you go.
After
that's rugby league.
Going down to the Tigers in an absolute thriller last week.
I do not understand one bit where the Sharks' heads are at the moment. Going down in Golden Point, almost going all the way for the draw. But now they've got to back it up and turn it around against a Parramatta side. I'm looking at very realistically after looking at what they did Easter Monday. They would have reset. Mitchell Moses wouldn't have any concerns going into this. No. And goal-kicking captaincies, it's like, what's that?
Pretty much. I mean, with Mitch Moses back from Easter Monday, you could tell that Parramatta were a whole different team. Everyone was screaming, where was this from the start of the year?
Well, I think the answer was, you get a genuine halfback into that side, you actually get some results, direction, and Josh Adokar opens up the field. He'll try scoring opportunities. I think that's as simple as that. Now, they do have a bigger challenge because Cronulla is a much bigger forward pack than that of the Tigers. And the fact that the Sharks are coming off that Golden Point defeat, where are their minds at going into this week? What do you think Craig Fitzgibbon will be looking at and saying, we got to reset the energy and prove that we're not pretenders here?
Well, they want to bounce back after the Golden Point. It was very deep Golden Point, mind you, into the second half. They wanted to bounce back, obviously, and they need to learn to finish games when they can actually, if it comes down to a close finish, they need to learn how to seal it earlier, not lose it very late on. But they just pretty much change a few things. Like they got Aero back, so that might add some more strike power out wide and a bit more speed. Not saying Hirode was slow or anything, but Aero's used to that side a bit more often and can link up with Will Kennedy and the likes a bit easier.
Well, the key matchup is, of course, going to be Nico Hines against Mitchell Moses. The clear contrast between Moses' Easter Monday performance and Nico's absence, particularly in the final 10 minutes of that clash, it will really show. Oh, now, both sides have... Well, I think the Sharks actually have a stronger magic preview. They'll try and use the odds and the powerful outside backs to really outmuscle the Eels both out wide and in the middle. But I think I'm going to have to go with the upset here. If Moses gets on the front foot with a pack that just works harder, regardless of who's actually available, Moses' kicking game, if he backs up what he did against the Tigers, that's really going to dictate the outcome right here. I think you will see a very clear-cut direction. I think the Eels, very close. The Sharks forwards will definitely keep Trindle and Hines honest in the business end. But if Parramatta get off to a fast start again, off the back of Mitchell Moses, I got to go with the Eels 1-6.
I do like your thoughts, but in saying that though, is it a good thing that Parramatta have had a win? Sorry, two wins, then one win, then a bye.
Oh, well, they've had the 2 wins, but having that win on Easter Monday,
And
the
then
ecstasy coming down during the bye, now they can get ready to reload again.
Is that kind of killed the momentum though, having a bye just after their the second win of the season?
I don't think it does.
I don't know, but the rate. Look, the Sharks went down with a fight, but I think they'll get the W in this one, 1-6.
All right, so we have a split for the first day. One going the upset, the one going for a more established look on life. Hopefully, we don't need to go to Golden Point for this one, lest Nico Hines goes missing again.
No, certainly not.
Now we got another classic. A very modern rivalry, this one, but nevertheless still important. It's the Sydney Roosters up against the Dolphins in primetime Friday night league action.
Dolphins have got a gain of Felice Kaufusi but in saying that though, Daniel Safidi's out, who's also another big player for them. Marshall King has been named to come back in as well, which pushes Ray Stone to the bench. Kurt Donohue's also back via the bench, and that also sees Sean O'Sullivan and Kenny Bromwich also revert to the reserves.
Now, the Roosters have made no changes after that dominating win over St. George Illawarra on Anzac Day. And Mark, I know you're absolutely looking forward to talking about how well the Roosters performed off the back of Sandon Smith at 5'8", of course, the Ashton Collier medalist. These games are very typically, in the short amount of time that the Roosters and the Dolphins have played each other, they have been extremely entertaining affairs.
Round 1, 2023, when the Dolphins first came in, no one would have expected the Dolphins to beat the Roosters straight out the blocks. But that's what exactly happened here. The energy in that every time these two teams have met have continued on ever since then, regardless of where it's played at, which is supposed to be in Suncorp and Allianz anyway. So
the big thing for me with the Dolphins was they need to not switch off when they're leading dominantly at halftime. We saw that result against Canberra, switched off, and they paid the price by conceding practically these 6+ tries in 40 minutes.
Yeah,
they can't afford to do that, especially with a Roosters side that is proving to be highly unpredictable even at the best of times.
Well, yeah. Who would have thought, well, one, Roosters being at the bottom of the ladder heading into last weekend, and two, have a thrashing win like they did against the Dragons on Anzac Day, which I must say was painful to watch.
You secretly loved it.
But in saying that, though, I have to give credit and thoroughly deserved Ashton Collier medal to Sandon Smith. He got 2 tries, 5 from 6 conversions.
I think pretty close to it.
Plus a sin bin.
I don't think you really celebrate the sin bin, but I think...
Still, to have 2 tries, 5 from...
You celebrate.
Yeah. But to have what? I've never seen a man at a match, well, probably has happened, to have a sin bin and then get man at a match. It's very rare that it happens, but he had an absolute phenomenal performance against the Dragons.
Yeah, they just flew out of the gates very fast. They caught the Dragons flat-footed, and then they just opened them up in and around the middle chat. And particularly, of course, when you got the likes of Angus Crichton, James Tedesco, and the legendary hero who sold Clint Gutherson the fattest dummy alive in Blake Steve.
Yeah. I mean, that wasn't the only time Gutho got fooled, let's just say.
But that was a shocker.
Yep.
But in saying that, though, the Dolphins have themselves been capable of pulling off their own fast and entertaining brand of rugby league. And Isaiah Katoa, this could be I know it's probably going to be a little bit cliche. Everyone's going to be looking at the fullback battle, Esco, could he earn an Origin recall versus the absolute electric superstar Hamiso Tabuai-Fidow?
Who could also be in the Queensland side.
Oh, it's a lock. He is going to be there. There's no
But
question.
where is the question? But yeah.
He'll be there. He will be down.
Oh yeah,
for Billy
absolutely.
Slater. Kafusi coming back helps the offset. I do think the Dolphins have a bigger pack going into this, but do they have any genuine hole punches like an Angus Crichton or maybe even in Spencer Leniu? Just that raw, hard run. I mean, that they can really bend a line backwards.
Of course, the GOAT, Mark Nichols.
Oh, well, he'd probably tip in the mold to see if he actually scores a try.
Well, he could potentially well. But when you look at the lists in the forward packs and the second rows and that, no, they don't. Compared to what the Dolphins have, like you just said with Angus Crichton, and obviously you got Victor Radley there and Spencer Leniu and that, who can bend the line, and we know what they are very capable of.
I just think with the combinations, and we all know combinations are particularly important. Of course, that's something the Dragons don't understand at this point in time in key positions. But I think on the all, Hugo Savala has made a massive difference to the Roosters in a short amount of time. He's only had a handful of games at this point, but he has had a bigger impact to this point on the season for the Roosters than Chad Townsend has.
I was going to say, yeah, compared to an experienced player like Townsend, he's gone really, really well. And he showed again on Anzac Day.
Now, will the Roosters have that same luxury of starting fast? I don't think so. The Dolphins, and especially with the enter battle in particular, this is a toss-up game. This could go either way for both sides.
I think it would, but the record that the Dolphins have at Suncorp, especially against the Roosters, again, flashback to 2023, round one, that's one that keeps me going back to these sides. I've got a feeling Dolphins will sneak away with this one. They know Suncorp a lot better than the Roosters, to an extent.
Both the Magic records are pretty healthy for both sides.
That is true. And this is the Dolphins' third ever Magic Round. I reckon Dolphins will sneak away in this one. 1-6. And let's just say we add a little bit of extra time to it.
So you reckon this game could go to Golden Point?
I definitely think it can go to Golden Point. Back on the back of the performance, what the back on what the Roosters did last week.
Well, I would probably be expecting a Dolphins bounce back, to be quite honest, and I do think that we will see that. But after what the Roosters did, if they can just bottle that and just look at how well they progressed from that 50 to 12, 14 drubbing they had earlier in the year against the Broncos, I think they could go over the Roosters tight. Again, tight, I think Golden Point, but I think the Roosters 1-6, and I reckon, controversy alert, Sandon Smith, the winning field goal.
Ooh,
big
okay.
call, big call.
But we know what he's capable of. He put in a man-of-match performance against the Dragons, so that is easy. I can understand where you're coming from with that.
We move on to day two, who I should say. We've got the South Sydney Rabbitohs up against the Newcastle Knights. This game will actually be Nine's free-to-air telecast game because for certain reasons that some stupid people that we don't care for have to have all the... Let's say all the primetime highlights from, say, 6 o'clock in the evening onwards. I don't really care about that one. We're focused here. But Wayno back in Brisbane once again as the home team. Some big ins for Adam O'Brien because he has to take anything he can get at this.
Absolutely, he does have to.
Saifidi, Adam Elliott, both back in the pack. Saifidi starting, Elliott, I should say, on the interchange. Tyson Frizzell will be at lock forward with Matt Croker shifting to the interchange and no Thomas Cant or Tyrone Thompson to this point. And rolling with Jack Cogger at halfback with Tyson Gamble ruled out still with that injury he suffered in the run-up.
Well, one bit of magic we're not going to see from South Sydney is from Latrell Mitchell, who has got a 1-week suspension, so that makes Jai Gray going back to fullback yet again. And the halves have been Jaden Sullivan and Jack Whiten being in the halves. So another new combination for South Sydney in the halves. Meaning that Ewan Aiken goes from the back row to centres. Also sees Talon Duncan promoted to starting sign and Lockie Hubner returning on the bench with Fletcher Myers and Liam LeBlanc on the bench with Lewis Dodd again back to the reserves.
I think we can all agree, heading into the season, if there was ever going to be a coach that was going to get sacked first,
Adam O'Brien?
it's going to be Adam O'Brien.
Oh, absolutely.
And I know people, the fans, the press, and the players will all say one thing or another about Adam O'Brien. But at the end of the day, Newcastle are on a 5-game losing run going into Brisbane. They have not looked likely. Their attack is amongst the worst in the league at the moment.
And you've got some key, very good players, like Origin players, Bradman Best, Dan Gagai, Kalen Ponga. Where are they? They haven't really been firing either. And Ponga's on $1 a season.
And with all the speculation about the Perth Bears, we don't know their official name yet, but there's been a lot of talk of the Perth Bears, hit lists, some ridiculous, some...
Depending on what source you see it from.
It always depends on the quality of the information. But the Knights need something. Yep. They need to absolutely make a statement. The continuous changing in the halves has not worked out. And these are guys who are getting injured, like Tyson Gamble broke his nose and then got left out of the trip to Christchurch. But this has got to be a breaking point. When do Newcastle pull the plug and say, this isn't working, we got to do something about it?
Well, it's still got Jackson Hastings waiting. That he has not been used for God knows how long. He's not the best half, but he's got a lot of experience and we know what he is capable of. Pairing with the right player, you've got a good halves combination there that actually might produce something that the Knights need.
Then you look at South Sydney on the other side. You're looking at Jack Whiten, who was practically the best on ground for Wayne Bennett, and on Anzac Day against Melbourne, almost won that game too.
Yeah.
Barring some late Eli Katoa brilliance, if I recall correct.
That is correct,
on
yes.
that. And Jaden Sullivan, who seems to be enjoying his time at South Sydney. I'm looking at the balance of their spine and the fact that they can get a ball player like Lachlan Hubner coming into the game off the bench. Even when the Rabbitohs look at their worst, same level as Newcastle, it's just sort of you got to give the Bunnies the edge.
But is that the Wayne Bennett magic, though?
It's not just the Wayne Bennett magic, but I think Jai Gray is South Sydney's long-term fullback. That
absolutely.
Is an absolute statement.
And we know what he's like. It wasn't, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, he was leading the Daily M leaderboard at some point earlier in the season?
I think he still, or might be. Or he's definitely in the top 5 on the Daily M medal count, and he's certainly polled well with us here for my superstar medal. But I'm looking at that, and I'm thinking, Newcastle do not have any genuine firepower that can really trouble the South Sydney forward pack. You look at the Bunnies, they got Chloe Matangi, Duncan and Hubner are good through the middle. Hubner, especially with the ball play. And then you throw a big body like Jack Whiten, who's going to be marking up against Jack Cogger and the likes of Dane Gagai, Kai Piss, Paul and James Schiller. I'm sorry, Newcastle, they're not even a candle to them.
Plus, the Magic Round record for the Knights is terrible.
And that's the other thing as well. South Sydney, I think they've only had one loss ever since Magic Round first came into effect. Maybe 2, but the one clearest I remember, them going down to North Queensland in 2024.
Yeah, absolutely.
Other than that, they've been near and around the best performers at Magic Round. I think another loss to Cronulla in there as well at one point. We can all verify this later on, but those are the 2 that really stick out to me. And I think having Gray, Sullivan, and Whiten in the halves is a lot stronger than Ponga, Sharp, insert halfback here, and Phoenix Crossley.
Insert halfback here, but it's true. Yeah, I have to agree with you there. And Knights look shot.
And even though Bellamy, Bellyache, we'll get to him shortly. Even though Wayne's going to be, he just sort of yeah, all right, 13 straight losses in Melbourne, and 19 straight losses with South Sydney, and 14 straight losses to Craig Bellamy in the last little while. You still have to go with the Rabbitohs. I think 7-12, settled spot. I'm with Jai Gray at the back. Not that unpredictability or recklessness, liability Latrell Mitchell tends to bring with him when he launches himself at unsuspecting players' shoulders and heads every other time.
Yep. Look, I'm going to go Souths 13 plus. That's just... Knights look shot. The record is bad. They got no attack. The defense is barely there. Nothing really sparks the Knights this year, so easy South victory.
And I think 7-12's even been kind, but I think
No, 13 plus.
I feel justified that at the end of the year, Newcastle will end up with the wooden spoon, and Penrith
That's a
will
big call.
Penrith at the moment, they're looking. We'll get
Dismal.
to Penrith as well. Oh, but I still think Newcastle are going to end up at the bottom bigly.
That's a big call this earlier on
And
in the
Adam
season.
O'Brien, of course, we've agreed is the first coach sacked. Now, interesting matchup we have here. The middle game for Game 2, we have the New Zealand Warriors at home to the North Queensland Cowboys, who, coming off a 50-18 demolition of the Gold Coast Titans,
Being 18-12 down. 18-12, 18-6.
18-12 down.
18-12 down.
Coming from that, when the Titans got off to that fast start, luxury of the same 17 men that took to the field, and Tom didn't. God, didn't he have a game? And for the
Absolutely,
Cowboys.
he did. Yeah. He's their long-term half. Long-term. I don't see him leaving the Cowboys anytime soon, and I don't want to let him go. Unwanted at Brisbane, and ever since he's gone to the Cowboys, he's been very, very, very consistent. He's even had Origin call-ups since he's been up in Townsville.
But that raises an Origin question. You got Dearden there, who was practically the incumbent 5'8" throughout the course. Cameron Munster is fit, 3 weeks out from Origin selection, where people start to put their teams together. Do you see a scenario where Munster or Dearden is the bench utility?
Oh, I would actually put Munster as the bench utility over Dearden.
So you'd, even if people say Munster is the better 5'8" than Dearden?
Because Munster can come in with experience and all the energy that he produces when their forwards are getting worn out and tired out, and that he can bring the energy, spark the defence, spark the attack of Queensland, and could rip the Blues' defence to shreds and wear out the forwards even further and force errors and make the Blues give away penalties.
And the changes for the home side?
Exactly the same. After their win over the Knights.
Yeah, I had to think about that one.
I did have to
A
think
little
about
bit
that one,
embarrassing
yes.
right there.
Sorry.
Well, the interesting thing is, I think the Warriors, you look, and I don't think anyone really expected the Warriors to still be in and amongst the mix of the teams with the healthier records. I think the Warriors are actually sitting fourth on the ladder at
That
the
is
moment.
correct. They are sitting fourth.
Very impressive. Shaky in Las Vegas, but now they've honestly found something. But the majority of their wins still in New Zealand. All their home wins were wins in New Zealand. You think,
They just beat the Broncos in New Zealand, though, in Golden Point.
well, if Reece Walsh wasn't there, they probably would have lost. But the fact that he kicked off and gave away 2 competition points, Newcastle that offered nothing, really.
Well, the Knights' record in New Zealand is also very terrible.
And then they threw Manly and the Roosters out on the scrap heap in less than appealing conditions. And then their only other win was in Australia against the West Tigers, which take them as you will.
Well, yeah.
But this is going to be an interesting
But-
test.
Sorry. Go on.
The Warriors going in, there's still no James Fisher-Harris, there's no Dallin Watene-Zelezniak, there's no Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, but we have seen the best of Ale Leotawa, Leka Halasima, and Dimitrik Vaimunga. Now they're going to up against Jackson Purdue, Tom Dearden, and Robert Derby as probably the Cowboys' best free performers, and Jason Taumalolo, who always offers a point of difference in the forwards.
Yes, better than what he has done in a few years ago. But Cowboys also were bad. Well, not bad. Poor at the start of the season, and now they're starting to get some form as well. And sitting 6th on the ladder.
I think they're chasing 5 straight wins heading into this week.
That
weekend.
is correct, yes.
And look, forward battle is always going to be interesting
Oh, mate.
between the two sides. And and this is going to be one of the Warriors, I think, could really use a good performance for. If they manage to pull off another big win against a pretty big pack in the Cowboys, I know that's sort of been a recurring theme with some of these teams, but I think they know they're not going to get the same windows of opportunity they got against Newcastle. So they really got to make their defensive efforts count, especially if the Cowboys get a running game going where they can get Dearden and Drinkwater breaking them up through the middle.
like they were last year before. Because that was a good combination, Dearden and Drinkwater. It's still there, but I don't think it has been as good as what it has been in years gone by.
Yeah, I think Luke Metcalf, Jake Clifford, it's pretty much chalk and cheese, really. A sort of like halfback slowly learning a trade versus a halfback who's practically been both sides of the world but not considered the best.
Mm-hmm.
I think with the Warriors, it's always they're going to get haunted by the Australia record, their record playing in Australia at this point. But after the way the Cowboys open the Titans up and the way that they can get down into the gritty and come back if needed, I got to give an edge to North Queensland on this one. I think competitive game, probably two tries in it. I'm looking at the Cowboys' left edge, Jackson Purdue, Tom Dearden, Murray Taulagi, and Jeremiah Nene, who just remembered that running is actually an essential part of playing rugby league.
Exactly, yeah.
Egan actually taking carries. I think the Cowboys was still a lot of will really trouble the youngsters of the Warriors in those positions. I think North Queensland 7-12 winners look for Jackson Purdue to bag 2 tries at least.
Wow, that's a big call. The other thing, though, the Warriors did beat Penrith last year in Magic Round, and no one expected that whatsoever. But this is 2024. 2025.
Yeah, it shows how long we've been out of the game.
Exactly. I think the Cowboys will win this one 7-12. I just don't think the Warriors can quite do it. You never know. I think it's a 50-50 game, but I think the Cowboys will end up coming out on top.
Now moving on to the final game of day 2, we have the West Tigers against the team that everyone loves to beat up when they absolutely suck balls in St. George Illawarra.
We have made a change, or I shouldn't say we, the Dragons have made a change. Lycan, is that how you pronounce his first name?
Yeah, Lycan.
Lycan Kintogia is replaced in Lockie Ilias, who has been dropped. Sione Fanu has been dropped also, has been replaced by Corey Allen, who is making his first appearance in NRL in over 12 months, if I'm correct in saying that.
Yeah, after he did his ACL, I believe.
Yep. Hamish Stewart is returning from concussion at lock with the Bellin going to the bench, and Blake Glory dropping back to the reserves as well.
As for the West Tigers, coming off that golden point thriller against the Sharks, no changes for Benji Marshall's side. Not the first time, it is not the first time these two sides have clashed together at Magic Round.
2 years ago, 2023, because the Dragons had the bye last year.
Yep, and of course we all remember the last time the Tigers beat the Dragons at Magic Round as well, don't we, Mark?
No. Yes. It was like 2 points in or something like that, 20-18 scoreline, I believe.
The best you can pray for with a rookie halfback in his first game and the highly rated young forward Loco Pacifici Tonga on the 18th man is the fact that the Tigers are probably so exhausted they can't pick themselves up after playing for 88 minutes straight. That's the best you can hope for.
I certainly do hope that, but I'm not very confident.
Also, you got to say, Lachlan Ilias, this has to be a case of deja vu, right?
Pretty much.
Like, he gets dropped, then he's going to get injured, and then he's going to find himself on the outer at the Dragons.
And who's going to replace him? Who bloody knows?
Well, at the moment, Shane Flanagan going for the blooding strategy at this point. Whether or not he can solve the defensive woes of 6 or 7 tries in a single Anzac Day round.
But how do the Dragons go with keeping our bloody juniors? Is the next question. Absolutely poor.
Here's the number of juniors the Dragons have successfully retained in the last couple of years.
But we have got a junior back this year in Damien Cook.
It's not the same.
But he's gone full circle. But yeah, I know what you mean.
Couchman versus May. Oh boy, now this is a matchup that should get people interested.
Well, May, he played what? The full 88 minutes. When was the last time you saw a prop?
Rarely do you see efforts like that. And the fact that this is why people question why the Roosters' retention decisions at this point, because he could have been doing this in the tricolours for the Roosters. Instead, he's doing this out of Concord in the West, where the Tigers are in their natural homogenous position of 9.
True.
But honestly, he has been their buy of the year. He's got to be the best recruit the Tigers have had in years. And he has got to be in the running for the buy of the year.
Oh,
Honestly,
absolutely.
And he's racking up points everywhere he goes. He doesn't even have to score tries. He just has to churn out 200 plus us running games, have about more than half a dozen offloads, and then just back that up defensively, and you're sorted.
Absolutely. I have to say, he is looking very good. And if he can back that up again this week, whew, if he's not near the top of the daily, if he's not in the top 4 for Daily M so far, there's something wrong with the voting system.
And, of course, the other big topic, Lachlan Galvin, of course, the headlines that have spawned off the back of him and his decision to leave the club, comes back in.
But he's leaving the club at the end of next year, not this year. Unless they grant him a release.
Are you sure about that?
Well, unless they grant him a release.
As we all know the play. Clubs say one thing to the press, and then people read the press, but then they end up doing the exact opposite thing we think about.
And contracts don't mean anything nowadays either.
Oh, contracts haven't mean anything, probably since sliced bread.
Pretty much, but still.
Sliced bread. David Clemmer, first game against the Tigers. Surprised they actually chose the name for this one, but I suppose didn't really carry that much on the salary cap. He's only on till the end of the year, so why not have a good shot at the club that said you're basically not wanted anymore?
Yeah. I don't think he's made that big of an impact at the Dragons than what everyone has expected, or by my expectations. He hasn't made that much of an impact, but that's just me personally.
Now, there is a path for the Dragons. Their edge forward, Dylan Egan in particular.
He's a
particularly
gun,
down the left-hand side. If they can get the ball to him and Valentine Holmes, there is a pathway for St. George Illawarra, and of course Moses Sully on the other side. An absolute tackle-busting beast. We all acknowledge the Tongan Centre is a powerhouse that you really have to nail down defensively here. But I think after the Tigers got the monkey off their back, just recalling Galvin, he got them a win at Leichhardt. Well, it was probably the other stand-up performer if you weren't looking at Terrell May, just absolutely
true.
defying gravity and physics for a front rower.
That is true.
I'm really leaning towards the Tigers going back-to-back. I think the Dragons, you tip the Dragons to win games they should probably win, only for them to disappoint you in the most spectacular fashion possible.
So we lost to Parramatta and the Roosters when they're both last in the ladder, but we can beat Melbourne when they're ahead of us in the ladder.
Yeah, but you also lost to South Sydney after leading 24-12.
That is true. Yeah, we're hot.
They might have tightened things up since the early on stage of the season, but you're still a flight risk. And flight risks aren't a good thing unless you want to merge or be shipped off to South Australia.
Oh, yeah, true.
Neither of those things will happen, of course, but that's just a pipe dream I tend to think about. Tigers 1-6. I think Terrell May.
1-6.
Terrell May, again, will probably be close to the best on ground. If he gets going early and then he has Pole and Samuel Fainu, who also had a good game, didn't poll any points with me, just very tight. I was considered, but just Galvin got that extra point with Adam Dewey there on my end. So I think the Tigers back-to-back wins and really keep close with the top 8 heading into the first Origin period.
I agree with the Tigers winning, but in a 7-12 margin, I am not confident in the Dragons at all, especially after the performance against the Roosters.
And day 3 of the NRL Magic Round starts off with the Gold Coast Titans, who have just booked their spot to Bali because Province Summons Premiership services have now been closed to them up against the Canterbury Bulldogs side. Enforced 3 main changes for the Dogs. Matt Burton suspended for 1 game, so Bailey Haywood will once again resume his place at 5'8". Daniel Saluka Fafita in for Josh Curran, who I believe is gone for 2 or 3 matches. And Harry Hayes, Curtis Moran on the bench to also cover for the fact that Satili Tupanua just racked up 5 matches worth of suspension in probably the space of 80 minutes.
Yeah.
I think that pretty much sums it up right there. Blake Tough also joining the bench as well for a little bit of extra utility.
Big news for Gold Coast is David Fafita has been relegated to the reserves, so axed altogether. Jermaine Jolliffe has been replaced by Isaac Fasulumawali due to suspension on the bench. Khalees Haas is back, and Josiah Pahulu, if I pronounce that
Josiah
correctly.
Pahulu.
Sorry. Also on the bench, and bad news: Brock Gray out for the season due to ACL.
That's a sad thing.
Yeah,
And didn't he get sin bin in both starts he got for the Titans off the bench?
probably.
So the bloke, he finally gets into the NRL this year. And what's the major highlights for him? Sin bin twice and ends up with his ACL. That's a sad
That's just
way.
rotten luck.
That is a sad way.
That's rotten luck.
Hopefully pulls through, gets back better than ever, and hopefully Des gives him another chance.
If Des is still at Titans.
Well, that's the thing. Second season, it's sort of all bets are off for the coach, especially considering he's gotten so frustrated with David Fafita. It's just like,
See you later.
Who shall not be named. I've decided to leave him out of the side this week. He had a good game against the Dragons. In one we lost, and we tried bringing him off the bench in games we lost. So we're going in a completely different direction this week, and Voldemort, hopefully he learned something out of that, and we'll go from there.
Yep, that's pretty much true. But the Titans were in the top 8 early on in the season, and now
Even though the results they had meant nothing. I mean, they beat
they're now 14th.
Newcastle and the Roosters in back-to-back weeks after getting they had a bye in round 1, so that's still why they sort of have 6 points on the table at the moment.
But they've gone from top 8, maybe on the edge of the 5th or whatever at one stage. They're down to 14th. And they lost after having an 18.12 lead.
Yeah, that was embarrassing the way they performed against the Cowboys. Bulldogs, meanwhile, I think they will have taken a lot of lessons out of the demolition job the Broncos got. Probably revenge
they finally had their first
Probably
ever
revenge
loss.
for 41-16 last year when we absolutely clapped their asses at the best time. And probably even without our best players on the field as well. That was the other thing.
Pretty much.
Just waltzed in the Suncorp and tore them a new one. I think we were the reason Kevin Walters ended up getting sacked.
Probably.
Probably a lot more, but I'd like to think that just the Dogs.
Of course you would have been a Doggy supporter.
Look, I mean, people are going to say, haha, Dogs lost, win streak over. But it's like, we didn't concede 50. We're still in it. We're one of 14 teams who can still realistically win the premiership because of the unwritten rule of rugby league that you can't concede 50 points in an Australian competition. Sure, we've lost Tupanua, so we've lost a lot of impact forward.
And Burton hasn't played a lot of footy this year for you guys either.
But
you still managed to win without him.
Yes, but also Bailey Hayward and Toby Sexton have a very solid halves combination. And when he wasn't there, we actually held Newcastle and the Bunnies to 0.
Yeah, but it's the Newcastle Knights. What do you expect?
It was also South Sydney, but that was actually the best performance of the year. And then we came down off that high and we came back to reality. Unfortunately, we did come back to reality.
But they're still on top of the ladder.
Still on top of the ladder.
By 2 competition points, I believe.
Yeah, if we lose this week, Melbourne's definitely going to come.
Depending on how Melbourne go, and we'll get to that game shortly.
But look, I think Bulldogs notoriously have not won at Magic Round. That is just an absolute fact. We have lost to Newcastle twice. We have lost to Canberra at least
that was
3 times. Yep, we lost to Canberra 3 times.
Especially the one 2 years ago. That one was memorable.
But apart from 19 and 22, we have been in every single Magic Round clash up to this point. If we can and Stephen Crichton, I think he'll probably take some reflection because he got called out defensively. He by the Broncos with a short dropout, only for him not to retreat back to his right centre position, where some of the traffic came down. But another gun forward, Payne Haas, just decided he was going to put the wrath of God into a footy player, and then Adam Reynolds played off the back of that in his best performance. I think the Bulldogs you will hear our bark, and
absolutely.
And the biggest thing, we will also back the bark up. That's what we're going to do. We're going to roll out the Suncorp Stadium against the Gold Coast Titans side, heavily demoralised.
I was going to say dismal.
Dismal as well, that have not looked like pulling off a win. That if they jump out to a lead, we can rest assured knowing that we can and get them by the 80th minute.
Oh, absolutely. That's hands down and given. Hands down and given.
Defensively, we are still amongst the best in the league, even after having 7 tries running against us and Jared Sutton deciding 3 sin bid in and amongst it all. But, all right, I'll admit, the Tupanui, that was sort of not called for, really.
No,
why
right.
giving away an attacking penalty? That's the one thing you don't want to do. Why give away an attacking
Brain
penalty?
fade, that's what that was.
I think it was just pure frustration because we were really up against it.
True.
But I think, nevertheless, the Bulldogs are still... That core unit is still there, something that the Titans still have no grasp of 18 years after coming into the NRL whatsoever. So, look, the Titans, they might be able to do what they've done this year and just decide they'll just be possessed for...
They're just a lot of people saying that Titans are there just to make up the competition. They're just like another team, like just a number team.
I think there was a good roast... it was a roast video, nevertheless, as quality is in the eye of the beholder, but basically said, if a filler episode of a TV show was an NRL club, that would be the Gold Coast Titans.
That is true.
There's not enough... They don't give enough reasons for people to hate them, but they also don't give enough reasons for people to support them unless you're actually a Titan supporter.
Exactly. I think their last biggest home crowd was when Jared Hayne was there. His first game on the Gold Coast. I think that was the last decent game crowd.
Oh, they probably had bigger crowds than that. I think Tino and David Fafita, when he first arrived, they would have had bigger crowds.
Yeah, but still, they haven't really done a lot since. Look, I'm going to say this now. The Titans might not just even bother turning up.
No, I still think they'll turn up and they'll still try because they still got AJ Brimson, Lofi Camperera. You still got to take care of Jojo Fafita as well.
I know, but they're not very convincing.
Defensively, we'll strip it back. We'll just go back to what we did. We'll just try and tackle hard and run hard. And then the magic works off the back of that. It's a winning combination, Hayward and Sexton, and we can win this game. I say the Bulldogs 17-12. 7-12.
7-12.
Yeah, 7-12. I think we can put
That's
2
being
tries
generous. I don't think the Titans will be that good as what you think they will be. I think the Dogs will be absolutely too strong. Demolish your Titans. 13 plus.
So you're going 13-20 on this one.
Convincingly 13-20.
You're a little bit more optimistic than I am. So one says the Bulldogs win 13-20. The other says 7-12. A little bit more respect to the Gold Coast Titans. Make of that as you will. Oh, now isn't this going to be a game in particular? The Penrith
game of the
Panthers, the under siege, 4-time defending premiers, running last against a Broncos side that had 15 minutes away from lifting the Provan Summons trophy before Nathan Cleary decided that he was going to curse the Broncos into eternity and deny them another trophy in probably what many would regard as the second worst half performance by a Brisbane halfback.
True. For the Broncos, though, Jordan Ricky is back, so that's a very good plus for them. He's straight into the sign with Brendan Piakura going back to the bench and Tyson Smith is the 18th man. Trent Tolau, sorry. He's also named on the bench. And otherwise, an unchanged Brisbane lineup.
Yeah, I think actually Trent Tolau plays for Penrith, so why the NRL website has him listed down there, I have no idea. But nevertheless, the Broncos...
Trent Tolau says Broncos, so...
Well, Talau's not playing with the Broncos. He's with Penrith with that... Luke Garner is back in the centres for Ivan Cleary, but Brian Toto is said to be at least another week away, and Luke Summerton has been named a dummy half with no Mitch Kenny any available either. I think actually Mitch Kenny has... Nope, he's not there. So, look, the Panthers, I'm not joking, they are under siege at this point.
Wouldn't it be funny, well, not every Panthers supporter, but everyone else, or everyone who's sick of them winning all the time, aka me, full-time premiers, then get the wooden spoon?
They probably won't, but their performances have been less than convincing.
How many wins have they had? Vegas?
And that was it. Oh, and then they beat the Roosters, but that's the only other win they've had in Australia.
one win on Australian soil, and one win in Vegas. That's it.
I
They're
don't know.
stone dead
I
last.
don't know where Penrith can go from here. And someone
When
pointed this out to me. It's not just the fact that Nathan Cleary is having a bit of a harder time with a whole bunch of younger crop of players coming
look
through.
at the experience they lost, Luai, Fisher Harris, especially because Luai and Cleary are a very good halves combination. They've lost also in the last few years. Burton, Crichton, Kickow. Who else have I missed? A host of players that they've big name players that they've lost. Taruva, he's gone.
Running back, that one name in particular, James Fisher Harris.
They've missed him. You can tell because there's not that. Yes, they've still got Moses Leota, but Fisher Harris really brought that energy to the middle of the park.
It's the one word. It's the alpha. Penrith do not have an alpha in their forward pack. And this was pointed out to me. I was watching a short of a certain bigger content creator because that's usually where this was pointed out to me. But you think back to every single premiership winning side, just say within the last 10 years, include 2014 for obvious reasons. But you look at who was the biggest alpha in the forward pack in each of those years they won.
Fisher Harris.
In the four straight. But before Fisher Harris, who was the alpha for the Melbourne Storm when they won those 2 premierships in 4 seasons?
God, you're testing me there. You might need to remind me of who that was.
Jesse Bromwich. Look at the Sharks when they won in 2016. Who was the biggest impact on that result for Cronulla?
Gal.
No, it was Andrew Fafita.
I knew that. The game-winning try.
Jared Weary-Hargreaves for the Roosters. Everyone's talking about how much Jared is missed by the Roosters. You can see that here too.
Mm.
You lose the bad dog, you lose the big dog in the pack, you're going to struggle.
Yeah.
At the moment, the Roosters have it better at the moment.
Not by much, though.
And you're struggling between Moses Leota, solidly underrated, as we all know.
Oh, absolutely.
But Lindsay Smith and Liam Henry have to be developed or nurtured to become the big dog in the pack. And considering the fact that Ivan's had to rotate both of them in and out of the starting side at various stages, that shows you what's missing out of Penrith at the moment more than and that. And it's like, it's the inspiration factor. I mean, you look at Cleary, you look at Yo. I mean, they are good leaders, but do they have that extra alpha ingredient to say, jump on my back and run with me?
No, they don't. Dylan Edwards tries to.
Oh, Dylan Edwards is another prospect entire.
But he just, yeah. I mean, when they click, but they're just not clicking this year at all. And it's very, very surprising to see that Penrith are going so poorly.
Maybe it is to be expected, especially when they are going up against the top front row pairing in the Premiership of Pat Carrigan and Payne Haas.
Oh, absolutely.
That is a 1-2 punch we found out the hard way over, and a lot more sides will find out over. And I mean, whether or not Adam Reynolds is actually fit for this game, that's another big thing.
Well, he has been named.
If you want to beat the Broncos, you have to beat Carrigan and Haas. And that is going to have to fall on Moses Leota to try and match that pound for pound.
2 against 1, I don't see that happening.
Look, I got to go with the Broncos on this one. It's just sort of like Penrith have become a harder tip than St. George Illawarra.
That's true.
But I think the Broncos, 1-6, I think they build off what they did against the Dogs, and they look to try and solidify their spot. Critically for them, they got to solidify a spot in the top half of the 8 heading into State of Origin because they're going to get smashed big time.
Oh, absolutely.
And with key players missing.
Yep. Look, Broncos haven't had Reece Walsh, so I thought they were going to lose against the Dogs. But they've gone out and shown that they have one player out and they can still manage to win. Like one superstar player and they can win. Broncos will win this one 1-6.
I just see it being the only reasonable conclusion unless Penrith, once again, like they did against the Roosters, just
put a rabbit out of the hat unexpectedly.
Whether or not that happens is another matter.
Absolutely.
And finally, on day 3 of the NRL Magic Round, we have the Melbourne Storm and the Canberra Raiders. Ricky Stewart, a luxury of no changes on the final game of day 3, and of course, coming off that massive come-from-behind victory over the Dolphins.
Absolutely massive that one was. But for Melbourne, Sua Fa'alongo has been named to return on the win. Tuikaka Mika is back on the bench in the only change, with Lazarus Valepu reverting to the reserves, and a softer summer in the extended squad, and could be elevated into the 17 after making a successful return in Q Cup last week.
Now, in these Storm Raiders matchups, defense goes out the window.
Oh, freaking oath it does.
Particularly for Canberra. It just goes out the window. You think back to some of the big wins Melbourne have had in the recent years, Canberra's definitely going to be on that list. You think 2023, you think last year when they played. And the Raiders are going to be up again. And they've been playing well at the moment. A lot of people underestimating them, but I think...
What's second versus third on the ladder?
So you have a top-of-the-table clash going on right there. Either one of them wins. In the best-case scenario, they snare second. In the greatest case, they go top of the ladder, depending on other results.
I was going to say, depending on how the Dogs play, Melbourne or Raiders could go first. Even the Warriors could even leapfrog up to the top of the ladder, depending on results. But the Warriors have a differential of -4, whereas the Storm have got a positive 78 and the Raiders a positive 58. And the Dogs positive 74.
They know they're going to be in for one of the biggest showdowns of the year so far. Storm, Raiders is... I'm not sure there's an upset in this one. I just think defensively, Canberra, the best game they played was against Brisbane. Other than that, who have they beaten of equal or higher caliber?
No one.
You just can't. And especially after the performances in the last 2 weeks the Melbourne Storm have had, going from letting the Dolphins run over the top of them to downing South Sydney in Melbourne.
Which wasn't by much.
You got to love the Storm in Brisbane. They are just that heavier favourite. It's not even funny. Cam Munster, Jerome Hughes against Stephen Strange and Jamal Fogarty. You might as well call this a non-contest.
But would Jamal Fogarty put the off-field talk to the side a bit?
It hasn't affected him in the same way it's affected someone like Lachlan Galvin. But ultimately, I would say Eli Katoa, Hudson Young, your key matchup, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Right, that is going to be an absolute mouthful.
And Melbourne's Magic Round record compared to Canberra is better?
Oh, Melbourne's is amongst the best.
Yeah.
I mean, you just have to poke a stick at a year that Melbourne Storm have lost, and it is...
Yeah.
It is that. It is zero.
Yeah.
To my knowledge, I didn't look into this coming into it, but it's because it's the Melbourne Storm. You always find them on the positive side. Actually, no, I think once South Sydney got the better of them.
That was only very early on in Magic Round days.
I believe it would have been about 22, 23. I think 23, actually. 2023, that would have happened.
I believe so. Anyway.
So only once they have lost that magic. But I got to give it to the Melbourne Storm. When you look at the most professional organisation there is at the moment in rugby league, they are that definition. And Ryan Pappenhausen is going... I think he will have another electric performance there. Forward battle is pretty much equal, but you can't rule out Cam Munster and Jerome Hughes really throwing this one into gear and putting the Raiders under incredible pressure, particularly if they get off to a faster start than the Dolphins did. I'm going to have to go 13-20, Melbourne Storm win.
Ooh, that's a bit of a margin. You know what, though? I'm actually going to back Canberra. I'm going for the upset. Canberra are doing a lot better than what I thought they would be. Look, I didn't think they would be down near the bottom of the ladder, but I thought they'd be at the tail end of the top 8. Like, not tail end. Yeah, bottom part of the 8, just lingering around there. They're up in third. Could this be... I'm throwing the question out there, so write what you want. Could this be an early grand final matchup?
No one's thinking that.
I know it's a long way off, but could we see a Storm Raiders grand final? Potentially. I know it's very early on, but I don't know. But I'm going to say Raiders win this one in absolute nail biter, and I'm even going to say it's going to go into extra time again.
Yeah, on the new rugby league game you're going to get, All right, we're going to take a break for that one. That's all the NRL Magic Round tips. We'll be right back with everything for the Magic Weekend.